Okay, so we will have now a sort of 20-minute or so conversation about the East-West Rail project with Neil. Again, open to questions from you guys as well. This, of course, is the railway that will stretch between Cambridge and Oxford. The route updated just a matter of weeks ago now. And Neil has described this as a project that will truly enable innovation, and one I imagine many people in this room will be anticipating. As Sarah mentioned earlier, the length of time it can take to get between Cambridge and Oxford. Yep. So it's hardly rocket science to work out that something needed to be done. Neil, you mentioned to me that you wonder whether people appreciate exactly what's going to happen with this project. Do you want to give us an overview of where we are at the moment with it, the timeline, what was updated with the route recently? And
Absolutely. I was just going to say to those investor colleagues, we've got a project and we know what it's going to do. So we've got money, a home for their money if they want to spend it there. East-West Rail has been in the making since 2011. So the Oxford to Milton Keynes Bedford route was signed off in 2011. It was due to complete in 2025. And it's going to complete in 2025. So we're on track. 85% of it's built. We had 11 compounds, 6 of which we've already disassembled and we've given back to the landowners, and we're starting to. So it's progressing really well for a major infrastructure project. The reason it was set up was very clear, wasn't it? Travelling east to west is just impossible. I travelled from Cambridge to Milton Keynes last week, and it took 2.5 hours. And you just say, to get to Oxford, there's another hour and a half, possibly, depending on what time of travel. It's stopping growth in the area. That's why it was all set up, and it's still the stated ambition. If we think about the arc itself, Oxford to Cambridge, most of our innovation happens there. You know, we've got the 2 pillars of Oxford and Cambridge on each side. We've got the city of Milton Keynes in the middle. We've got large number of employable individuals across the whole of the arc. And what we've got is leakage. So because there are no jobs there, people either go to London, or worse, they leave the country and they go somewhere else, because this is where all our talent is disappearing. And the idea of creating East-West Rail was to enable the arc to exactly the sorts of things you're talking about here today, which is about creating innovation, being that superpower that we're talking about in science, building the tech corridor that we know we could do, but most also to make sure people can live there as well. So by connecting up, we'll make the journeys a bit easier, affordable, and also greener.
And tell us about the route, because your first question from Slido is, why no Aylesbury, violin emoji, crying face emoji?
No Aylesbury, because Aylesbury wasn't on the original route. So when it was planned, it was Oxford to Cambridge, and that's how it was. And it sort of goes through Milton Keynes. It's not off the table. It is something we're looking at. And again, if I speak to those investors, it can give me some money. I'd love to connect Aylesbury up as well.
You talked there about the importance of it being green. Can we unpack that and the sustainability side of this a little?
Well, when you think, if you're travelling for 3 hours, and I was speaking to somebody last week, and they said, oh, there's going to be a new road open soon. But look, think about the congestion on these roads and whether they're electric or not. And there aren't many electric cars out there. No, they will eventually come. We have got a challenge with the amount of carbon we emit when we're traveling between these places and the lost productivity. The one thing we don't often talk about in the UK often enough is how much of our productivity is lost because of the time we sit around in cars and not do anything. So there's a benefit in productivity, and clearly this is going to be a low carbon railway. That will help us get to where we want to get to. And if we can get more people off the roads into trains, and we also think about the last mile. So we're thinking about places like Thamesford, we're thinking Camborne, and we're saying, how can we make sure that people can move between their home and the railway station in the easiest possible way? So think about last mile and first mile.
I mean, you're touching on cars there. You've been asked, should the East-West Road be built? But I suppose you've made your view.
I'd rather get on with East-West Rail first.
Yeah. What will the significance of this project be? We sort of talked about people, to businesses and to companies that are either already operating
Yeah.
in these cities or may now be influenced by this project to look at their options?
So, you know, some of the figures, I mean, colleagues around here will know them better than I do. You know, for 100,000 residents in Cambridge alone, there are 146 inventions every year. I mean, this is phenomenal stuff. The railway, once it's built, alongside of the work that everybody else around the room is going to do, will generate £110 billion GVA in the region. Cambridge alone, by connecting from Bedford to Cambridge, will be another £4.6 billion above where you already are. This is enormous growth. This is going to impact not only the towns along the region, the whole region, but also enable the UK to really step up and be counted for what it's known for, great innovation, particularly in sciences. And we proved that only a couple of years ago as to how quickly we can do things if only we're allowed to. So there's going to be a big area. But the other thing is very much about, if you think about, I talked about leakage of talent. All of a sudden, you can get to Luton from Bedford in no time at all. So because we were going to connect up Bedford. Getting to Heathrow, if you happen to be in Oxford, you can get down to Heathrow fairly easily. After, you know, if you happen to be in Milton Keynes, dead easy, down to Oxford and down to Heathrow. Connects up to Stansted. We've got 3 stations we can connect up to very easily. And that's got to lead to more inward investment. It's going to lead to further development along in the region. And it isn't just homes. We're talking about real jobs as well, all the way along the line. So that's where we hang our cap and hope that's all going to happen. All the evidence says it should do.
Do you think there are other particular development projects that you would point to that this could help to unlock?
Bedford. Bedford's an incredible opportunity. You know, we talk about levelling up. Bedford is one of the most deprived towns around. Yet it shouldn't be, because it's right next to Milton Keynes, where there are lots of jobs, and getting to Cambridge shouldn't be that difficult, if only they could get there. But if you think about those of you who live in the area or travel through the area, there are thousands of homes being built in Bedford now. All those people who live there are travelling to London, because it's easier to get to London than it is to go to Cambridge, Milton Keynes, or indeed Oxford.
You've been asked here, what will the travel time be from Bedford to Cambridge?
Bedford to Cambridge, 45 minutes.
Okay. Someone's asked whether you think HS2 should have a station where it crosses this line, so that you've got a connection from the Arc to London and then also...
If we carry on and do what we should do, which is just... because there is a bit of a connection potentially at Aylesbury. There's a lot of work going on with HS2. And in fact, there's an area where we're crossing, and we just want HS2 to finish their work so we can connect the 2 bits up. So that's probably where, if there was ever going to be one, there would be one there. It's not in the plans at the moment.
But it could be. So that little crying emoji could be changed into a beaming...
It could be. And again, that's a really good point, because with all of these things, whether it's East West Rail, or it's connecting Aylesbury, or it's HS2, one of the easiest ways to get some momentum behind is, I'd ask you all to be advocates for these railways, because it benefits all of us, not only in terms of carbon, in terms of creating employment, access to employment, you know, giving people a chance to go and get better paid jobs. So one of the things we've been saying all the way along with East West Rail is it will create better paid jobs than if we don't build it. And if we want HS2 to connect, we've got to start building a case for that. But that's got to be the business community and ourselves.
When we were speaking before today's event, you were talking about the sort of communication with local communities, the consultations that you have to work through as you're getting a project like this together. Yeah. Just take us through how you approach that, because as you said, this will be quite an emotive issue for a lot of people. Some of you may well know my background. I'm a shopkeeper, so I used to build shops. They're not as disruptive as building a big railway through your back garden. Nobody really wants one. So you have to really engage with them, whether or not they're going to use it afterwards or not. Now, we know there are parts of Cambridge, parts of Oxford, where the residents of these villages won't directly benefit from it. Because they probably don't ever travel by rail, they're probably retired, they probably live there, they've probably got a local farm, or whatever else. So it is just a genuine impact. So our job is regularly, I mean, I've got the team going around now,
since we announced the route, everyone now knows where the railway is going to go. So we're connecting with the local communities, talking to them on a regular basis, not necessarily just to allay their fears, but to try and give them an explanation of what we're going to do, but more importantly, how we're going to manage the construction of the railway, because they fear that more than the railway alone, because there's lots of horror stories you'll have heard, even on HS2. I face them every day in Bicester, where there's potholes everywhere and the residents are having to suffer. So we're putting lots of plans in place. In fact, the team have now said, in the areas where we are likely to disrupt roads, we may go and build the roads first to make sure they can cope with our heavy traffic, so we don't end up with potholes. But it takes that level of thinking, including those residents whose houses will be at risk. And we're talking to them right now and saying, look, if you need to sell, you know, whether you've got a personal reason or you're going to have to move home, come and talk to us and we'll help you out now. And we've started doing that as well.
You have? Okay.
Yeah.
Question from Duncan McCann. Will the scheme survive a change of government?
So I think both governments, regardless of which colour government is in place, the one thing they both are talking about is innovation is really important for the UK. And the only way we're going to create jobs is by doing exactly the sort of thing that you're trying to do here and we're trying to do in supporting you in building East West Rail. So I'm pretty confident.
And you were talking about wanting people in the room to be an advocate for this, and you did you say you visited Milton Keynes and the business community there?
Yeah, I was there last week. Yeah,
how they can show support, and I guess it is just as simple as speaking up in favour of this.
And it is a plea really, because this is going to be a joint approach, because East West Rail will finish in 2030, and then the success of it is based on two things: that we do connect up Bletchley to Cambridge, so we've still got that hurdle to go through over the next 18 months. So we're going to go through planning. Even though we've announced the route, we've still got to get planning. So we're going to get on and get that planning. But in order to make sure that your question about are both governments going to back us, if we go quiet, why should they? So there is something about raising this at every opportunity you get with, be they politicians, be they other businessmen, including the staff that work for you. Do raise it with them, because this benefits just about everyone in the region. It isn't just a government initiative. We're lucky in the sense we do have a government that really believes in this at the moment, and we've got to keep that momentum going.
Sorry, I just lost a good question here. Where did that go?
Oh, don't worry.
I've just seen, does East West Rail need a better name? I hadn't spotted that before. It feels quite
Does it need a better name? I don't know. I'm open to suggestions. It's a name we came up with partly because that's what it was doing. And if you look at railways generally, the GWR is the Great Western Railway, so it goes to the west. We've got the northern route that goes to the north. So, I mean, you know, railway people are pretty simple people. They came up with what, you know, it's a bit like my son who wanted to name a dog. And I thought, well, makes sense.
That's what it says, right? Yeah. So you mentioned achieving planning being the next step. Do we have a time frame at the moment?
Yeah, we hope.
Guess for when you might be looking at that?
Ideally, we'd like to, you know, fingers crossed, before we have the election, we would like to put planning in.
And so then, following that, what would the timescale be?
Probably about 6 months or so.
The project.
Yeah, because most of the work is done beforehand, so hopefully we'll get on with that.
Perfect. Any more questions from the room for Neil about journey times or otherwise? I think we've got one just about halfway back here.
Andrew Ross from Global Garden. Have you thought of issuing a green bond to raise the money? And why are you still using diesel engines?
Good question. On the green bond, it has something, we have talked to the Treasury about it, and that conversation continues. We are not planning on using diesel. We are going to use diesel between the Oxford-Milton Keynes route, partly because that was the quickest way to get it done, and we've got 3 other railways that go on the same route, and that would have required everyone having to change. So in order to just get that done, we said we'll use the existing stock. But our plan is very clear. It's either going to be electrified, it's going to be battery, or truthfully, it won't be anything, because madness, when we open a railway in 2030, how could it possibly be diesel when we're thinking about banning it then? Hope that answers your question. No?
And I think one more question at the back there.
Hello, Sean Fitzgerald from Cambridge. Question, why is the route prescribed at the moment to take freight, which is coming from Felixstowe going west, through Cambridge? Heavy freight at the moment is a bit strange going through a city like that when there are alternative options of coming in from the north rather than in from the south.
If there isn't currently a route going through Cambridge, we won't be taking freight. We won't be putting additional freight through Cambridge. So that's not our plan. So if it's not already going through Cambridge, then that's not our intention.
Okay, excellent. Well, if there are no other questions, look, I will just thank Neil for joining us. Look, obviously an initiative that's going to change a lot of things for a lot of businesses, I think, represented in the room today. So thank you for shining a light on it for us. And if you could all put your hands together and thank him for joining us.
Thank you.
That would be great.
Thanks very much. Cheers.
And you now have time for another refreshment break. We will pick things back up with the Right Honourable Grant Shapps at about 3:20. So please be back in good time for that. Thanks.